There's an ETF that dividend investors absolutely love. It has over $60 billion invested, a growing dividend, and a track record of beating the market. The problem with this, for UK investors, it's not really accessible inside a stocks and shares ISA. And that ETF is the Schwab U.S. Dividend Equity ETF, also known as SCHD. SCHD has become almost legendary amongst dividend investors online. If you search for best dividend ETF, it's almost always at the top of the list. But for UK investors, there are a few issues. It's US domiciled, it's not UCITS compliant, and that means you typically can't buy it inside an ISA. Which raises the big question. What is the best SCHD alternative for UK investors? So in this video, I decided to find out. I asked investors, I analysed YouTube finfluencers, I asked AI, and then I looked at the actual data. Specifically, I looked at suggestions from the Trading212 community, recommendations from over 50 YouTube videos, answers from ChatGPT and Google Gemini, and finally, my own data-backed analysis. And by the end of this video, we'll see whether there's one clear SCHD alternative, which fund shows up again and again, and whether the data actually agrees with the internet. Because the answer might surprise you. But before we look at alternatives, we need to understand what makes SCHD so popular in the first place. So let's start with what is SCHD. It launched back in 2011, and its goal is simple: to track the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index as closely as possible. Now, this index focuses on high-quality US companies that consistently pay dividends. But it's not just chasing the highest yield. Instead, the strategy screens companies based on factors like strong cash flow, return on equity, sustainable dividend payments, and a history of dividend growth. So rather than buying the highest paying companies, SCHD focuses on quality dividend growers. Another big reason investors love SCHD is the cost. The ETF has a total expense ratio of just 0.06%, which makes it incredibly cheap compared to many dividend funds. In terms of diversification, the fund currently holds around 100 companies, to be precise 101 holdings. These are mostly large, well-established US businesses across sectors like industrials, consumer goods, financials, and healthcare. And of course, because this is a dividend ETF, the income matters. SCHD currently has a dividend yield of around 3.5%, which is comfortably higher than the broader US market. But what really attracts investors is the combination of income and growth. Since launching in 2011, SCHD has delivered an annualized return of roughly 13.3%. That means it hasn't just paid a solid dividend, it has also produced strong, long-term capital growth. So when investors say they want an SCHD alternative, what they're really looking for is something that offers a similar combination of things: quality US companies, reliable dividends, low fees, and strong long-term performance. So before we start throwing out alternatives, we need to define something really important. What actually counts as an SCHD alternative? Because if we don't set clear criteria, you could end up with completely different types of funds being compared. For this video, I'm going to define an alternative using 4 key criteria, and they're ranked in order of importance. First, it has to be accessible inside a UK stocks and shares ISA. This is non-negotiable. There is no point finding the perfect SCHD alternative if UK investors can't actually buy it tax efficiently. Second, it needs to be US focused. SCHD is entirely made up of US companies, so if we're trying to replicate it, we shouldn't suddenly switch to a global or UK only fund. Third, it should follow a similar strategy. So we're not just looking for any dividend ETF. We want something that focuses on high quality companies, strong financials, and ideally growing dividends over time. And finally, performance. It should have a reasonably similar long-term return profile to SCHD. Not identical, that's unrealistic, but it should at least be in the same ballpark. So to summarize, an SCHD alternative isn't just a high dividend ETF. It has to tick all 4 boxes. ISA accessible, US focused, similar strategy, and similar performance. Now, here's where things get interesting. Once you apply these filters, a lot of the usual suggestions don't actually qualify. So let's start with what real investors are saying. And so I went straight to my first source. I asked the Trading212 Community, what is the best SCHD alternative for UK investors? And the response was exactly what you might expect. There was no clear winner. Instead, I got a wide range of ETFs, all suggested with equal confidence. Here's the full list of what people mentioned. Now, at first glance, this looks great. Lots of options, lots of ideas, but there's a problem. Most of these don't actually meet our criteria. Once we run these ETFs through our 4 filters, a lot of them start to fall away. Some are global dividend funds, some are UK focused, and others follow a completely different strategy, which means they might be good investments, but they're not true SCHD alternatives. After filtering everything down, only 2 ETFs actually tick the boxes, FUSD and USDV. These are the only ones that UK investors can buy in an ISA, focus primarily on US equities, and follow a quality dividend style approach. So what does this tell us? The community clearly agrees on one thing. There's no obvious, universally accepted SCHD alternative. But there is a smaller group of ETFs that keep coming up once you apply some structure. So the next question is, do these same ETFs show up when we look at the YouTube finfluencers? Or does the internet have a completely different answer? And so we turn to YouTube. Because if there is a best SCHD alternative, you'd expect the finfluencers to have already found it. So I analysed 50 different YouTube videos all trying to answer the same question. What is the best SCHD alternative for UK investors? And this time, the results were a bit more consistent than the Trading212 Community, but still not exactly clear-cut. Across those videos, these ETFs kept coming up again and again. At first glance, this looks promising, but once we apply the same 4 filters, things change very quickly. A lot of these funds fall into the familiar traps. Some are UK focused, some are global dividend ETFs, and others don't really follow an SCHD style strategy. After filtering everything down, only one ETF actually ticks all 4 boxes, and that is FUSD. Out of 50 videos, multiple creators, and thousands of views, only one fund consistently fits the definition of a true SCHD alternative. Which is interesting, because this is now the second time we've seen FUSD show up. It appeared in the Trading212 Community shortlist, and now it's the only finfluencer pick that actually meets the criteria. So at this point, you might be thinking, is FUSD the answer? Or is this just coincidence? Let's see what happens when we ask AI the exact same question. Next, I asked ChatGPT the exact same question. What is the best SCHD alternative for UK investors? And straight away, it highlighted something important. UK investors can't easily buy SCHD because US domiciled ETFs don't comply with UK and EU regulations, which is why we need UCITS alternatives listed on exchanges like London. Then it gave a list of what it deemed the closest alternatives. First and most importantly was FUSD, described as the closest strategy match to SCHD because it focuses on high-quality US companies, strong balance sheets, and consistent dividend income. It also holds around 100 US stocks, which is very similar to SCHD itself. Next is VHYL. This is one of the most popular dividend ETFs in Europe, but there's a catch. It's a global fund, not US focused. So while it offers strong income, it doesn't really match SCHD's structure. Then we have USDV. This one focuses on dividend growth companies, businesses that have increased their dividends for years. So philosophically, It's quite close to SCHD. And finally, we have TDIV. This ETF leans more towards higher yield dividend stocks across developed markets. So again, decent income, but not a perfect match. So overall, ChatGPT gives us 4 main options. But once we apply our criteria, only one stands out as the closest match, and that's FUSD. At this point, a pattern is starting to form. FUSD keeps showing up, again and again. But we're not done yet. Let's see what happens when we ask Google Gemini the same question. And so, after ignoring a pointless wine-related analogy, just like ChatGPT, Gemini pointed out that UK investors can't easily access SCHD due to UCITS regulations. So again, we're looking for UCITS compliant alternatives. But this time, Gemini approached things slightly differently. Instead of giving one answer, it broke it down into 3 categories, depending on what you value most. First, the quality growth pick, FUSD. Once again, this is described as the closest match to SCHD because it focuses on high quality US companies, strong balance sheets, and growing dividends over time. It also avoids so-called yield traps, companies that pay high dividends but aren't financially strong. Next is the Dividend Aristocrat pick, USDV. This focuses on companies that have increased their dividends for many consecutive years, so it leans heavily into stability and consistency. And finally, the Broad Income pick, VHYL. This is a global dividend ETF with exposure far beyond just the US. So while it offers strong income, it doesn't really match SCHD's US-focused strategy. So once again, we're seeing a familiar pattern. Gemini gives us 3 strong options, but when we apply our criteria, only one truly ticks all 4 boxes. And once again, that's FUSD. At this point, the evidence is starting to stack up. Different sources, different approaches, and yet the same ETF keeps coming out on top. But opinions are one thing. What does the actual data say? Now, before I looked at any of these results, before I even asked the question to the Trading212 community, YouTube, or even AI, I actually did my own research first. And I did that for one simple reason. I didn't want any of those opinions to influence this outcome. Instead, I looked purely at the data, focusing on ETFs that are available in the UK Stocks and Shares ISA, have a strong US exposure, follow a quality dividend strategy, and have a track record of performance. And after filtering everything down, I ended up with just 3 ETFs. FUSD, USDV, and HDLG. Now, what's interesting here is that 2 of these ETFs have already come up multiple times, specifically FUSD and USDV. But HDLG hasn't been mentioned anywhere else, which makes it a bit of an outlier, a potential hidden contender that the community and AI might be overlooking. Now, each of these brings something slightly different. FUSD focuses on quality and dividend growth, USDV leans into dividend consistency and track record, and HDLG introduces a slightly different approach, potentially offering diversification benefits. But here's the most important takeaway. Even when removing all outside influence, FUSD still shows up. So we've now seen FUSD appear in the Trading212 community, YouTube Finfluencers, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and now my own independent data analysis. At this point, it's no longer just a suggestion, it's a pattern. So the big question now is there actually a consensus on the best SCHD alternative? The answer is yes and no. There's no perfect replacement for SCHD. Nothing matches it exactly. Not the same structure, the same yield profile, not the same performance history. And that's simply because SCHD is unique to the US market. But when you apply a clear framework and look across multiple sources, a pattern becomes very clear. From the Trading212 community, to YouTube, to ChatGPT and Gemini, and even independent data analysis, one ETF shows up again and again. FUSD. Not because it's perfect, but because it consistently ticks the most important boxes. ISA accessible, US focused, quality dividend strategy, and solid long-term performance potential. That said, it's not the only option. USDV offers a strong dividend growth angle, and HDLG may provide a less obvious alternative worth exploring, but neither appears as consistently across all sources. So while there's no exact SCHD equivalent, FUSD is the closest thing UK investors currently have. And maybe the real takeaway here is this. Instead of trying to perfectly replicate SCHD, it might be better to focus on finding a fund that fits your own strategy and goals. With that said, let's wrap this up. After looking at investors, AI, and the data, the closest SCHD alternative for UK investors appears to be FUSD. But I'd be really interested to hear from you. Do you agree with that conclusion? Or do you think there's a better alternative that I've missed? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one and it genuinely helps shape future videos. And if you enjoyed this style of video, you'll probably like this one here, where I use the exact same approach to find the best dividend stock in the UK. If you found this video useful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep it simple, keep it realistic, and keep it effortless.